What's good, y'all? Track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this video, I'll be breaking down a dark ambient R&B type beat that I recently did using a new Omnisphere bank we just dropped called Omen. This sound would work well for the weekend or black in my opinion, but you can use the technique for any dark ambient type beat. It's not going to change a whole ton. All of the instruments in this are from our Omen bank for Omnisphere, and this full FLP plus another one is actually included with the bank for anyone who wants to support and grab a copy. I'm going to quickly just let the beat play from the top so you can hear what this tutorial focuses on, and then we'll just jump right into the video. So for this beat, I'm going to go ahead and just start with this little section up top, and then we'll just move through the rest of the beat quickly. Once we break everything down, the intro and everything will just kind of be self-explanatory at that point. But let's just go ahead and jump into it. So on pattern 1, we have Omnisphere. We have a sound from Omen called the Lovely Analog EP. And then these are the chords that I played with it right here. Here's what it sounds like by itself. And then if we take a look at the chords, the only thing I really did to them was I added a strum. And you can just kind of find whatever settings sound good to you. Just make sure you keep the preserve end setting on so it doesn't bleed into the next section of the track. So I added that to the track. And then I also like to just use this little slice tool and just use cell or whatever else will allow me just kind of snap directly to the grid. And I'll just go ahead and chop different notes out of here, just to make it sound a little bit more complex than it is, and have the sound not just kind of end. From there, I added a gross beat using a little fade out section just to make it a little bit more dynamic. I feel like a lot of R&B, what makes it interesting is having stuff kind of move through the track, fading in and fading out. So this is just a quick little thing you can do with R&B type sounds, just to kind of give yourself a little bit more of a dynamic feel versus that flat type sound a lot of VSTs will give you. And then just a simple little EQ. Cut a lot of the top end so it's not as bright, and then just rolled off the bottom end as well, just so it's not going to interfere with my subs and my 808s later. So by itself, it just had a nice full type sound, but I wanted to continue layering, so the next thing I added to it was another EP, and I played the exact same thing, so literally just copied and pasted it down. And the instrument that I used was the electric piano 2 from Omen again, but layered together, this is what you end up with. So my opinion just helps to add a little bit of edge to the sound and make it sound a little bit better. And then if we look at the effects on it, there really isn't anything other than just a EQ to make sure it's not too bright again, and then just cut the bass notes that aren't needed. So that was kind of the basis for the track and where everything started. Let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what the next layer is. So the very next thing that you hear in this track is this creepy kind of pad type sound, in my opinion. And that's Omnisphere number 3, the glitchy stutter pad from Omen again. And I literally just copied and pasted the same thing down again. So 1, 2, and 3 are literally playing the exact same thing here. And by itself, this pad already has a cool little sound. I wanted it just to add kind of like a little dramatic edge to the sound versus having it sound so R&B and happy. A lot of the Weekend and even Black type stuff just has a kind of like a creepiness to the sound a lot of times. So I was looking for a pad that would kind of give me something that was kind of unexpected, and this pad did that. So when we add it to everything else, this is what it sounds like. And then just the EQ to roll off a little bit of the bottom end. So very, very simple. So the next two things that you hear in this track are kind of my little piano type layers. A lot of times if I have a piano that's playing kind of a lower section and a higher section, I like to separate them out, just because later in the mix, if I want to turn maybe the lows down, or if I want to turn the highs up, or vice versa, it just makes it very simple to do. So this could technically all be one track, but I separate it out just so it's easier to mix, like I just explained. So the very first one is just 4, and the sound is the Rough Cut Grand from Omen again, and it's basically just playing some notes from the chord. So here's what it's playing with kind of the lower velocity on the second section. If we take a look at 1, you can literally see where those notes came out of, just this little section and then this little section. By itself, this is what it sounds like. And when you combine it with the track, it just helps to add a little fullness. And then the very next thing is this kind of higher end section with a piano as well. And I believe this is the Dreamy High Notes, and it is from Omen. And it's also just kind of taking a look at the chords and just picking out notes on a higher octave. So if you take a look at, this is what it's playing, and then we'll take a look at 1 in a second. So this is 5, and this is 1. You can kind of see where a lot of the notes came from. But when you combine it with everything else, is what you end up with. So just a lot of layering to kind of get to this point, but the track starts to take a little bit of shape. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what comes next. So the very next thing that kind of layers on top of this is this little atmospheric pad, and this is the SOS atmospheric pad from Omnisphere as well. So the SOS call from the Omen Bank. And if we take a listen to this sound by itself, this is what it sounds like. Just really pay attention to kind of the complexity and how it moves. So as I was kind of explaining earlier, a lot of this sound is kind of intertwined with adding kind of a creepiness and a dark kind of twist to a lot of stuff. So I feel like a lot of these atmospheric pads are great ways to do that. This one in particular has that kind of lower end beep layer, and then that higher end kind of almost like a wind whoosh type sound, which just helps to really add a nice dramatic effect in here, and also adds like an airiness to the sound. So let's take a listen to the track with that pad added to it. So a very, very simple touch, 2 notes, but in my opinion makes kind of all the difference in tracks like this. So just keep that in mind when you're doing stuff like this. The atmospheric pads are definitely always worth exploring. And then the very next thing is just a very simple bass line, just kind of paying attention to root stuff and moving around. And then just a little rundown, nothing really too complicated about that. And this is from the Omen Bank again, and this is called the Detune Sub 3. And for this particular one, I have an EQ, and I just cut a lot of the top end just so it kind of blends in with everything else that I have going on. And then here's what it sounds like by itself. I'll only play a little piece of it just because it's a bass line. It's probably not going to be that exciting. Simple, and then when you combine it with everything else, what you end up with, it's almost like a glue section that helps to hold everything together. So nothing really too complicated about that. Just helps kind of fill the track up and holds it together really, as most bass lines do. And then if we take a look at everything else that's in here, there's like a little top end melody over here, and this is just the dreamy high notes again. I initially had this playing with the other instruments as well, and like this little pattern, but then it became a little bit too repetitive, so I took that little section, I just separated that little rundown out, just so I could kind of control where it comes in and out, and I just kind of used it over certain little transition pieces. So with this little piece added into it, this is what it sounds like. So not a very complicated run or anything, nothing really too difficult about that. But in tracks like this, all the little small differences when your track is moving this slow and you don't have a ton of kind of stuff going on, the simple differences really kind of help to move the track along. So I felt like that was just a cool little transition piece. And then the only thing really left are these two little transition effects. So let's move on to the next section. I'll show you guys how I created those. So then the last thing you kind of see in here are these two little transition pieces. So the first one is super simple. It's from Omnisphere, just playing one note, the hard noise riser, and by itself is what it sounds like. Just a cool dramatic transition effect, and when you add it to the track, this is what it sounds like. So I thought that was cool, but as I was kind of playing with other sounds in the bank, I ran across this second sound on pattern 9, this little pad sound called Spectre, and this is what it sounds like by itself. So it just had like a crazy, almost animalistic alarm type sound that I thought would kind of just blend in here and just be like an interesting layer in here. So what I did was I went ahead and I just exported that out as a pattern. So pattern, quick renders audio clip. And then I imported that into here. And then I just cut it to only use this little second section. So with the track, this is what you end up with. So those two pieces kind of help transition it into what I felt was like the verse section. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys kind of how that came together. So for this particular track, when it actually gets kind of like to this little verse section, there's only really two elements that kind of change as far as instruments. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys those quickly. So on 14, we have basically 3 notes coming from this trippy reversed piano, and this is from Omen again. And these are the notes right here. So with the track and it moving, this is kind of what you end up with. Just kind of add something a little bit different in there. And then the other thing is like this little gated pad in here. So let me just go ahead and play this and I'll show you guys where it came from. So basically all that is this little gated pad from Omnisphere again, the gated pad 2. So here are the notes for it. So very simple. Then just took this little middle note basically and just moved it up an octave just for some variation. And then I went ahead and I exported that as an audio clip to get this little section right here, and then automate the volume, and I added an envelope like this just so it fades in and out. So when you combine this with the track and everything else, is what you end up with. So again, very simple. And then the only other thing that really plays in here is this little simple drum pattern. So these are the drums right here. Pretty much most of these are just Studio Sounds kits. I believe basically just 3 of these sounds, this one, the Union Snap, and the Hi-Hat 7 are unreleased sounds. Everything else, this is from the Legends Never Die drum kit, and then these hats are from the Submarine drum kit. But when you combine everything right here, this is kind of what you end up with for the drums. So what I started out with was just this little simple kick pattern, and just kind of let it build from there. Added the snap. Then I added these 2 little perk effects, and I just made sure I matched them to the actual pitch of the beat. So if you just click edit and detect pitch regions, you can kind of see what note it's playing. And then once you know what note it's actually playing, you can come down here and you can just select, right click over that note to make it your root note. So that way if you play a C or an E or whatever note you play, it's actually going to play that note versus playing whatever else it's mapped to. So I have 2 of those in here, 2 different kind of little perk sounds, and then I just added those in there as kind of like a little variety piece. If you take a look at it, the snap would usually be right here, but I wanted to just kind of switch it up and do something different, so I moved that snap back a little bit. So I just needed some percussion and stuff to fill in the area, so that's where that came from. And then the rest are just hi-hats. So very simple. And then the only other thing is this little open hi-hat. I just made sure I truncated it, so just make sure you move all these knobs to the left and your hold to the right, and all that does is make sure that when you actually let go of the note, it's not going to loop all the way through the sample. It's just going to cut off as soon as you let go of your MIDI keyboard. And just add this simple little pattern in here, so when you combine everything else, this is what you get. And then when you combine it with all the rest of the instruments, And then from there, it basically just moves into the little hook section. So for the hook section, I want to kind of simplify it. So I took out the second note, kept that playing in there. I added back in the little SOS dramatic section to it again. I cut out all the drums just to kind of bring the energy back down. And then the only other instrument that I added was this little club pad. And I basically just took the same notes that I had in pattern 1, but I just added some extra notes to it, basically as far as the chords go, just to make it sound a little bit more dramatic and not as clean. So this is pattern 1. And then the club pad is all the way down here. But if you want to just pause that, and you guys can just take a look at what this looks like. And then here's number 1. But basically that club pad was a little bit bright, so I did add an EQ to it that looks like this. And then another gross beat just to fade it out. And this one goes all the way to 0 versus the other one I had actually brought up a little bit on the previous element that I showed you guys. So basically it just moves from that section into this little hook section, kind of ends for this demo. So let me just go ahead and play this. And then from there, you could obviously sequence it however you'd like, have the little transitions back in, move it back to the verses or whatever else you want to do with it. But that's kind of pretty much how you create this sound. All of the sounds that I used can be found at studiosounds.com. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you are not subscribed to the channel for more content. My name is Track Kennedy. Until next time, studiosounds.com.